The Detroit Pistons fired Monty Williams yesterday, 1 year into his long-term deal with the Detroit Pistons, and Adrian Wojnarowski has tweeted out that the Pistons have received permission to interview a few assistants. We'll talk about who those assistants are, what this all means for the Pistons moving forward in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Koo Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Koo Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You guys will hear more about Game Time a little bit later. In today's episode, we'll talk about tomorrow. I'm recording this around 8 o'clock on the 20th. Tomorrow, the Detroit Pistons on the 21st. We'll be having Trajan Langdon's press conference with the media. It will be happening tomorrow. I will be there. I'll provide you guys the best coverage I can. We will obviously talk about it tomorrow after I get home and I can record about it. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about what we should expect to hear, what you guys should be watching and really listening to hear from him. Trade season has already gotten started. We have our first NBA trade. I just want to talk about that and how the Pistons could get involved in the trade market this offseason. But the first place we're going to is obviously their head coaching search. So 24 hours ago, or a little over 24 hours ago, obviously, but Monty Williams was fired by the Detroit Pistons. We talked about that all in last episode. I don't think we need to go any further into Monty Williams' time with Detroit. We don't need to talk about any of that. I do want to say, though, that listening to national media talk about the Detroit Pistons and Monty Williams' season with Detroit has possibly been the most annoying thing I've had to witness, even like this past season. Like watching this past season may not be as annoying as listening to some of the national media talk about this. It's so very clear that no one, and for good reason, like I don't think anyone's asking them to pay attention to a 14-win team. Like I don't think anyone's asking that. I think people also are not asking for their opinions of said 14-win team if you haven't watched them and don't know what's going on. I mean, all it took was for some of them to reach out to anybody who covered the team. And they have the resources to do that. They all have connections. They can go talk to a beat writer. They can talk to someone like myself. Like they all have, you can talk to anybody. And the crazy thing is I've had people from outside Detroit that have a bigger platform than I, that are more national guys than I, that have DM'd me and asked me my opinion on stuff. From ESPN, I've had it. So I know these guys can reach out to James, to Amari, to you can reach out to someone who covered the team and know that the BS that you are spewing on a national platform, it's just that. It's BS. So I that's one thing I just want to get out the way. It's been incredibly annoying to listen to people talk about this past season and how Monty Williams has been granted freedom and Monty Williams should be congratulated for finally getting out from Detroit. It's the other way around, guys. Well, whatever. I had to say something about that because it's been incredibly annoying to listen to people on ESPN talk about this. Like they obviously have no clue about what the hell happened this past year. So, anyways, let's move on past that because I'm gonna get more annoyed talking about it. Anyways, so on yesterday's episode, we did talk about some candidates that were said in James Edwards III article, the Detroit Pistons beat writer for The Athletic. He listed some candidates in his article. But today, and we talked about that yesterday, but today, Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted out, I'm going to read it verbatim. ESPN sources, the Detroit Pistons have permission to interview Dallas assistant Sean Sweeney and Minnesota assistant Micah Nori for a newly vacant coaching job. Pistons are also planning to interview former Cleveland coach JB Bickerstaff, who will be available to meet sooner than the rest. Pistons are expected to call for permission on more assistants too, sources said. So this is my takeaway from Woj's tweet. Now, I am not coming on here to try to act like Woj cannot be trusted. That's obviously insane. But I think Pistons fans should trust their local beat specifically James, and some of the things he says more than something Woj is putting out. I think you kind of saw, which is something we've talked about this on the podcast before. We saw this with the whole JJ Redick and Dan Hurley situation, where it seems like the narrative that Woj was trying to push wasn't necessarily the case, as we now see with JJ Redick being the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. We'll talk about that and how that has a trickle-down effect to the Detroit Pistons too. My point in saying all that is I haven't heard JB Bickerstaff mentioned by any of the beat writers. I haven't heard him mentioned by James at all. So I wonder if he actually is a candidate or if this is just another one of those Woj is doing a favor for a guy that helps him have sources, because that happens a lot. So that I'm a little questionable about. Not saying that JB Bickerstaff would be a bad candidate or that he shouldn't get an interview. I'm not saying that. I have not heard JB Bickerstaff either behind the scenes. I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it publicly from any of the beat writers. I haven't heard it from James in any of his articles. I haven't heard it really on his podcast. So I like, if I'm mistaken there, you guys got to let me know. But I haven't heard his name mentioned. So I just question whether that's actually legit. Now, when it comes to Sean Sweeney and Micah Nori, those names have been mentioned. And those names were mentioned in James' piece. I have heard those names behind the scenes as well. Sean Sweeney, to give some backstory, Sean Sweeney, I think, is most famous for his relationship and development of Giannis Antetokounmpo during his time with the Milwaukee Bucks. I think he probably is just as much known, obviously, by Pistons fans as one of the lead assistants on Dwayne Casey's staff over the last, actually during the entirety of Dwayne Casey's tenure with the Detroit Pistons. Now, this past season, he was an lead assistant for the Dallas Mavericks, who just reached the NBA Finals. He was the lead assistant on Jason Kidd's staff. I know that players really like Sean Sweeney, not just within the Pistons, but obviously NBA-wide, like throughout the NBA. Obviously, Giannis legitimately loves him. Every game the Pistons played the Bucks, again, after the game, you guys would see Giannis come over to the Pistons bench and give Sean Sweeney a hug, talk with him. There is a lot of love for Sweeney by NBA players, from NBA players throughout the league. And Sean Sweeney, at least during his time with the Pistons, was known for his defense, and in his specialty, I should say, was defense during his time with the Pistons. Though I was told by Locked On Mavs host Nick Angstead that he did have some input on their offense this past season in Dallas. So that's interesting. But Sean Sweeney, obvious connection to the Pistons. Dwayne Casey is still in the Pistons front office in that advisory role, so there's a connection there still. I'm not going to be surprised if that plays a part in any of that as well. But Sean Sweeney, there's a connection there. I think he's a legitimate candidate for the job. Micah Nori, we obviously know who he is. He took over the Minnesota Timberwolves, or not took over, but he kind of like was the head coach on the bench after Chris Finch had that injury in the playoffs. It's not that like Chris Finch wasn't there or anything, but he was the guy standing up, running up the sidelines and, calling timeouts and all that stuff, whatever. He took over interim, if you want to call it that, since Finch got hurt. And Nori also has ties to the Detroit Pistons, as he was also an assistant to Dwayne Casey. I think a lot of fans know Nori for his, I wanted to say wacky, but I don't consider him wacky. I honestly think they're really cool interviews, like mid-game and after the game, some of his cool answers. Very transparent guy, at least from the interviews I've seen from him. So he's a guy who's had experience on the bench, again, like I said, with Dwayne Casey and over in Minnesota. And he also has had interviews this offseason during the playoffs. The offseason really just started, but during the playoffs, he has had interviews with other places for their head coaching positions as well. So both these guys, I've seen some Pistons fans act like these are not like some big-time names. Like, are they crazy names? I guess not. But they are respected names. These are respected candidates throughout the NBA. Both these guys have had interest and interviews to become head coaches, and they both seem to be really liked, especially Sweeney. I can't speak so much to Nori, even though it seems like players really like him. I can speak to Sweeney that he is very much liked throughout the NBA by the players. So that is really interesting. And if it was me, I guess I should, switch over to the trickle-down effect of JJ Redick's hiring at the Lakers before I get into anything else. So there was some buzz that Redick could be on the Pistons' radar now that they officially fired Monty. I would have loved it. I'm a big fan of JJ. I really hope he does great, but I understand people being, concerned about having someone with no coaching experience, but I would have liked it. And he has a connection with Trajan. He has a connection with Arn. So I would have liked it, but he has officially signed his contract with the LA Lakers. The trickle down effect for the Pistons with that is every Pistons fan should now be watching the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because if the Cleveland Cavaliers sign James Borrego, I think that's when these candidates that you're hearing really shoot up the board. Because I think if the Cavs do not go with Borrego, I do think he probably shoots to the top of the list for the Detroit Pistons. However, maybe the Pistons feel like Borrego is already going to Cleveland. Like they get word that they feel like he is going to Cleveland. And I have heard rumblings over the last week or so that Borrego is, has a bit of a lead. And they've been going a little back and forth, so who knows what happens. But I have heard that Borrego has a pretty good chance of becoming the head coach over there. However, again, watch what's going over with Cleveland. If Borrego gets that job, I think this matters more. If he doesn't get that job, if someone like Kenny Atkinson or David Alleman get that job, then I think Borrego becomes a really interesting name, and I think he shoots to the top of the list here with the Detroit Pistons. With that said, let's remove that from the equation. If I had to put my money on anything, if I had to put my word on anything, I think right now I'd be leaning towards Sean Sweeney just because of the respect he has within this organization, the respect he has from players around the league and players that are currently on this team. There's connections there, and I think he has done. Obviously, he's earned his stripes, and he has experience. So I would lean towards Sean Sweeney. Though we'll just say they're expected to call for permission on more assistants too. I'm interested to see if Chris Quinn is one of those assistants because that's someone I've been really high on as well. So I'd really like Chris Quinn as well. And we'll wait to see. Obviously, I think you'll hear more about this as the week plays out. As we get closer to the draft, we'll obviously hear more and more about this, more assistants that are getting interviews. But I think Sean Sweeney and Micah Nori are legitimate candidates and respected candidates. And I think Pistons fans, those are not blown away by the names. So just remember that the Pistons' last three head coaches were all big names. Stan Van Gundy, Dwayne Casey, Monty Williams, guys who have won Coach of the Year, guys who have made it to the finals, guys who were respected before their time and had huge names, and none of them worked out with Detroit. So going for a younger guy who can grow with the team and maybe doesn't have as big of a name out there right now, maybe shouldn't be viewed as such a worrisome thing. The big name isn't always a guarantee. I mean, we just witnessed Monty Williams. So I don't think the name should matter as much. But yeah, I think these are legitimate candidates. I'm interested to see what we get as the season, or not as the season, but as the week goes on. But let me know what you guys think about this. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. Who do you guys want to see the Detroit Pistons hire? Again, let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. Coming up next, we'll be talking about Trajan Langdon's press conference and what you guys should be really paying attention to and hoping to hear from the Pistons' new president of basketball operations. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And one of the reasons why I absolutely love Game Time is I'm a procrastinator. I wait to the last second for everything, and that often screws me over when I'm trying to buy tickets to my favorite event. But with Game Time, they have last-minute deals all the way up, again, to the last minute of your event. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater near you. Flash deals save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And along with this, you can also see what your seats look like within the app. You don't have to wait till you get there. Oh man, I got the wrong seats. I wish I would have got some different seats. No, you can see it right in the app so you feel confident about the seats you are purchasing. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Man, for those of you guys who are living in Michigan, how hot is it for you guys? Like this weather is killing me, man. I couldn't survive in Florida or Texas or any of those southern states or even California, like over on the west, places where it's hot all the time. Because even when it gets like this, how hot it is in Michigan right now, I'd be just like dying, dude. Like it's hot as hell in at least in my apartment right now. The AC is a little wishy-washy, so maybe that plays a part. But my God, man, it is hot as hell. Anyways, but I know it's hot as hell in Michigan too over the last few days. Like, my goodness. Anyways, Trajan Langdon's press conference will be on the 21st. By the time you guys listen to this, it probably will be considered today. I'm posting this. This is a late episode. So it will be on the 21st. I will be there. I just want to talk about things you guys should be looking forward to hearing from Trajan during this time. I think one of the main things that I think instantly I fully expect, I think Pistons fans should fully expect immediately in this press conference, is for it to not feel as awkward as last year's. There was an article that came out. Oh my God, I need to figure out who wrote the article. I know Omari Sankofa II tweeted out the article. But I don't know if I don't want to give credit to the wrong person. I don't know if he wrote it or if he was just retweeting. Let me pull it up. I should have pulled this up beforehand. I'm sorry. Basically, while I'm looking for it, what the article was saying was talking about, oh no, I'm sorry. It was Vincent Goodwill. There you go. Thank God I looked it up. I want to give credit to the right person. Vincent Goodwill wrote an article, and within this article, these were words that were said. There are 4 factions in that building, according to a league source, and they're talking about the Detroit Pistons. That right there goes back to what we've talked about for months on the podcast, which is this team absolutely needing to get on one unified vision. They need to get on one unified vision that they all believe in, and they're all moving in the same direction. There should not be this side believes this, but then this side believes that, but then this side has more power and actually believes differently, and then this side actually has just as much power as them, but they feel differently than everyone else. So what are we going to do? That should not be what continues to go on with the Detroit Pistons. And I know that was a reason. Obviously, how bad this past season went was a huge reason, but this was one of the reasons why Tom Gores wanted to clean house. Because they want to have everyone on the same page, pulling in the same direction, going for the same vision. And I think that will be evident to Pistons fans immediately in this press conference. From Tom to Arn to Trajan to everyone else, it will sound like, I believe, from what I've understood from over the last few weeks, I do think they're all on one vision. I think they all believe the same thing. And they all are moving in the same direction. They all understand the mistake over the last few years, at least Tom does, which is all that really matters, that they had too many cooks in the kitchen. So I think that's the main thing that the Detroit Pistons need to turn around. The fact that it was actually reported on, I think, is a big deal because you've had people like myself speak to it, but it hasn't really been reported on, I don't believe, publicly like this until now. I may be wrong on that, but I don't believe it has really been reported on at all. With that said, that leads into the point of me saying I don't think this season or this press conference will be as awkward because I think everyone wants to be there. That's there. And everyone knows why they're there. And they're all working towards the same goal and within, doing the same thing. So that's number one. Number two, Pistons fans should be really paying attention to. I'm sure he'll be asked this. I don't know if I'll be able to get any questions in, but if I am able to get any questions in, I definitely will be asking about this. And it's just how do I word this? How Trajan wants to attack this offseason when it comes to their young guys versus making moves to help win immediately. I think, obviously, that is the biggest talking point of the Pistons offseason. It's going to be talked about all the way through free agency. It's going to be talked about all throughout the trade market, all throughout the offseason, in the trade market, I should say. It's going to be talked about nonstop. Do the Pistons want to stay young with their young guys and just keep moving slow and hope one of them develops? Or do they want to take another step and try to really add some win now pieces? And remember, we've had this talk with James on the podcast. We've had this talk with Omari on the podcast. I've heard James have this talk on his own podcast. I've heard or read the Pistons beat talk about this specifically, James. There is an opportunity cost that the Pistons are evaluating this offseason. And again, like I said, if I can get any questions in, and if it's not asked, I will try to ask this question. But one of the things I think everyone wants to hear is, where does Trajan stand in all of that? Because the opportunity cost argument is, okay, are these young guys, do you believe that they can get their value higher? Or do you believe this will be the highest it gets because you don't have that much belief in them? And if that's the case, do you want to move them now to get the most value out of them? Or do you want to wait and potentially risk their value going lower and trade them midseason, which I think would be the next, outside this offseason, I think the next time you'd see them really get, in trade rumors is the deadline. But that opportunity cost argument, that's something that they are discussing, that it's something they're going to discuss, but we haven't heard anything publicly about where they stand, how they feel, where are they leaning? How do they think of the young guys? How does Trajan think of the young guys? How does he feel about the free agency market? How does he feel about this trade market? How does he feel about trading this pick in the draft for a win now talent? Like that entire, yes, people want to hear about, does he want to make, trades? Is he going to be aggressive in the trade market? What free agents he likes? What draft prospects does he like? I think all of that gets tied into really the answer to the question I just presented. Where does Trajan stand on the young guys? And where does he stand in the argument of go slow with them and just build around them, continue to, despite how the last few seasons have went, or try to add pieces now in an offseason where you are going to sign Cade to that max extension, sign some win now pieces, and maybe move some of the young guys. I think once you get an idea, once everyone has an idea of where he stands with that, I think that answers a lot of the other questions without literally answering them. You get what I'm saying? Like if you get where he stands with that, I think you can reasonably make some guesses on where he stands with certain other things without him needing to come out and say it. So I think that's something that Pistons fans should really be reading into tomorrow or on the 21st, today, whenever you guys listen to this, on the 21st, when he has this press conference, where he stands with all of that. I think that's absolutely big time. And I would be shocked, to be honest, if one of the beat writers, one of the local reporters or whatever, don't ask that question before I even get the chance to. Like, I'd be shocked. So stay tuned for that. I think that's the biggest thing. And then lastly, there's a lot of things obviously you want to hear from them, but I don't think they're going to, really get in depth with, I mean, if they do, that'd be great, but I don't think they're going to with everything. I think there'll be some things they really, harp on. The next thing obviously is the head coaching search. What is he looking for in a head coach? What does he want for this team moving forward? What does he want in one of his guys in this upcoming head coach? Does he want a young guy? Does he want an offensive guru? Does he want an X's and O's guy? Does he want a player's coach? Does he want a defensive guy? Does he want like a pure X's and O's strategic genius? Does he want more of a locker room guy that can get the best out of his guys, that maybe has a bench of assistants who are more X's and O, but he can really lead with his voice and his connection with players? Like, what is it? And obviously you like a coach who can be able to do all that, but where are you looking for? Every coach has their own, attributes, and every coach has their weaknesses. So obviously, what are you wanting to be your attributes for sure out of your next head coach? What are you looking for? I think that's definitely going to be asked, and you definitely should pay attention to that. But those are just three things that I'm really going to be paying attention to. Not really the first one, because I don't expect it to be awkward at all. I expect it to really sound unified. I expect it to really, honestly, I think after this press conference, Pistons fans will feel really better or really good about where the team's at, or moving. Maybe not where they're at, but where they're going. Because I do think that this is an effort, and they've made an effort this offseason to try to get on the same page. And I think that will be evident at the press conference. So I think Pistons fans will feel good about this after the press conference. I do not know, by the way, if it's going to be live streamed. I have no clue. I will be tweeting out quotes. I'll try to tweet out some videos, but I do not know. I'll also post some videos on the YouTube channel, obviously, but I don't know if it's going to be live streamed. So I'll let you guys know as soon as I find out about that. But let me know what you guys are going to be watching for in Trajan's press conference. with the Pistons that's coming on the 21st, whether it's tomorrow, today, whenever you listen to this. Before we move on, I do want to say, why are people? I saw some people upset that it's happening on a Friday at this. I don't really understand why people are upset about that. If you're one of those people that are upset, please explain it to me because I don't really get why it matters. But whatever. Trade season gets started. We already have our first trade in the NBA offseason. The finals just wrapped up, and we already have our first trade. How can the Pistons get involved, and what does this mean for the Pistons? Will be talked about coming up. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. With the finals over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is still heating up, with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside the greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Players, stat types you are selecting. You can do all kinds of stuff on PrizePicks. I'm telling you, the players that go throughout all sports, whether it be NBA, NFL, heck, you can even check out esports. It's amazing on PrizePicks. There's all kinds of things you can do. And as far as the stat types, you can take, again, you pick more or less on rebounds, points, steals, points and rebounds, points and steals, stuff like that. I was doing all NBA season. I absolutely love PrizePicks. It's incredibly fun and super easy to use. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code, Locked On NBA on PrizePicks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. It's another great way to support the podcast. Dude, I am like, my God, I am heating up in this room. I need to get myself like a gallon of water and just put it in the freezer every day and just bring it out and just have it. Like it's hot as hell in this room. My goodness, dude. Trade season gets started. About 2 hours before I recorded this podcast, we had our first trade of the offseason. And it was between the Chicago Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder traded Josh Giddey to the Chicago Bulls for Alex Caruso. So how does this impact the Pistons? I don't know. I don't really think that specific trade does, to be honest. I just want to talk about trade season, to be honest. It's trade season. Trades, I feel like I was some of the more fun parts of the NBA, like talking about trades and rumors and trades actually going down. How does it impact this team? Whatever. I think trades are I think that's probably one of the reasons why the NBA is loved so much and has such a big fan base, is because it has more movement and more drama, more trade rumors. I feel like any other league out there, definitely more than the NFL. NFL guys don't really move like that. The NBA, there's always movement. There's always trades. There's constant rumors about someone moving this way or that way, whatever. So I just want to talk about trade season, to be honest. I think the Pistons, things that may affect the Pistons in the trade market, just some news I saw over the last 24 hours, and then we'll wrap up the podcast. I guess the Bulls trade actually does somewhat impact them if they are still in the Zach LaVine. They haven't been linked to him in a while since the deadline, but just in case they were, this does signal, I feel like, that the Bulls are trying to go more young and trying to rebuild. So they could be moving off of Vooch, could be moving off of DeMar and LaVine. So if the Pistons have any interest in any of those guys, we have heard that they had interest in LaVine last year. So do they still remain with that kind of interest in LaVine at all? Sounds like the Bulls are pretty desperate to move off of him. I think his value is at an all-time low right now in the trade market. So maybe the Pistons could swoop in and get him for really dirt cheap. Maybe they could even get paid for taking him. Who knows? I think that maybe impacts the Pistons. Some other news that I think could potentially impact the Pistons. Paul George for a while was linked to the Philadelphia 76ers. And according to Shams, at least I saw earlier from Shams, Philly is bowing out of the Paul George sweepstakes. And last we heard with the Clippers is that they are far and away on like an extension talk. Does that open the door for other teams? What does that do? Why is Philly bowing out? What other plan do they have? Who's available that they're going after? And where does Paul George go? I don't want to say, obviously I'm hinting towards could the Pistons go after Paul George? Obviously, I think the Pistons would love to have Paul George. I think Cade would love playing with Paul George. Do I think the Pistons could actually get Paul George? No. But the fact that he is, it sounds like he's available. I think it'll be talked about amongst the Pistons community. Hey, could we get Paul George? Again, I think Paul George would do great and really fit with the Pistons. They would love to have him. I just don't think that's realistic at all. Paul George did come out on his podcast and talk about, actually, I don't think it was on his podcast. I think he did on his podcast and also on NBA Countdown or NBA Today, whichever show it's called, and talked about how he wants to play. It's not so much about chasing rings as far as chasing the right way to play. So I don't know how much people buy into that, but yeah, I think that could potentially impact the Pistons. The fact that he's no longer on his way to Philly, what's going on there? Is Paul George legitimately going to leave the Clippers? Pistons have a lot of cap space, so stay tuned with that. And then also another thing with the trade market that we're seeing that could very much impact the Pistons are teams like the Bulls and the Grizzlies and I forget what the other team is, but there's a lot of teams. There's like 5-6 teams I've seen that really want to move up in this draft and have a chance at guys like Klingon, have a chance at a guy like Shepard, have a chance at a guy like Ron Holland or a Buzelis. If that's the case, I really wonder how much the Pistons really like the prospects themselves, how much they like trading out of it if it really is becoming. And it sounds like the Pistons might have gotten bailed by falling to 5. It sounds like that number 5 pick might become more wanted the closer we get to the draft, with all these teams wanting to move up and get their guy that they believe in. Maybe the Pistons can take advantage of that, because who knows how the top 4 is going to shake out. It's really, no one really knows how it's going to shake out. So Pistons could find themselves really being able to shop that 5th overall pick and getting some value out of it. So we'll see what happens. But that's all those trade storylines that I'm following really right now for the Pistons. There will be a lot more that comes out over the next few weeks, especially over the next week before the draft. But as of right now, that's where my head's at. And that's the storylines that I'm paying attention to that have been talked about and reported on by Shams, Woj, and local writers, etc. So let me know what you guys are paying attention to in the trade market, what you guys want to see from the Pistons. Any trade rumors you guys are interested in, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons first listen of every single day. Free and available on all podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.